My name is Walter. I've never been the type to spill my emotions to just anyone. But after what happened, I can't hold it in anymore. It's been eating me alive. The way she looked at me that night, the shock, the disbelief, it's burned into my memory. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry anymore, just empty. Lisa and I had been married for 9 years. It wasn't perfect, but I thought we had something real, something unshakable. We had history, inside jokes, quiet mornings with coffee, and a bond one never questioned. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there all along. Lately, she had been distant. It started small. Missed calls, unread messages. Then came the excuses. Work's been crazy, she'd say. Just a girl's night, she'd add. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but deep down I knew better. The tension between us had been growing for weeks, but the night everything fell apart. It reached a breaking point. She had been acting off all day, more impatient than usual, checking her phone constantly. At dinner, she barely touched her food, stirring it absently while her mind was clearly somewhere else. Then, out of nowhere, she said it. I'm going out tonight. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a discussion. It was a statement, cold and final. Where? I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling in my gut. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, just enough for me to notice. A party, she finally said. I put my fork down. Whose party? She sighed, like I was exhausting her. Does it matter? That was all I needed to hear. My chest tightened. My hands clenched under the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had spent the last few months pretending not to see the truth. Not anymore. It's Eric's, isn't it? She froze just for a second, but that second was long enough. Eric, her ex, the one she swore she had no lingering feelings for, the one she insisted was just a friend. Her silence spoke louder than any excuse she could have given. I need some space, she finally muttered, pushing her chair back. I just want to have fun tonight. I should have stopped her. I should have demanded answers, but something inside me snapped. I was done begging for her love, done trying to make her see what she was throwing away. Go, I said, my voice flat. She looked at me then, as if waiting for a fight. When I didn't give her one, she rolled her eyes, grabbed her purse, and left without another word. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to come back like nothing happened. No, when Lisa walked through that door the next morning, she was going to realize just how badly she had underestimated me. And she was going to regret it. I sat in silence for a long time after she left. The house felt different, too quiet, too still. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the kitchen, the distant hum of a car passing outside. It was strange how something as simple as an empty house could feel so loud. But it wasn't just the silence that was getting to me, it was the finality of it. The way she had looked at me before walking out, like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her way, something to step over on her path to having fun. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the plate of untouched food in front of it. Lisa had barely eaten, pushing the food around her plate like a child forced to sit through dinner. And yet, when she got up to leave, she had energy, this excitement, this impatience. It was obvious now. She had been waiting for this moment all day. She had been looking forward to it, counting down the hours until she could be anywhere but here, with me. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my hands over my face. Should have hurt more. I should have felt rage, betrayal, anything other than this strange, hollow acceptance. Maybe I had already known, deep down, that this was coming. Maybe I had been preparing for it longer than I realized. The truth was, Lisa and I hadn't been Lisa and I for a long time. The late-night conversations had disappeared, the spontaneous weekend trips, the little moments of affection, the inside jokes, gone, replaced with tension, avoidance, and, worst of all, indifference. I used to think the worst thing in a relationship was anger. I was wrong. The worst thing was nothing. And that's what I felt now, nothing. But that didn't mean I was going to sit here and let her walk all over me. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. If she thought I was just going to sit here all night like some clueless, pathetic husband, waiting for his wife to come home from her ex's party. She had another thing coming. I walked through the house, my mind working faster than my body. There was something liberating about this moment, about finally letting go of the illusion I had been holding on to. I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. I wasn't going to be the man she came back to when she was done playing her little games. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and stared at her side of it. Her dresses, her shoes, her carefully arranged jewelry. She had always been so meticulous about her things, so particular about how everything was placed. For a moment, I thought about how different we were. I was simple. I didn't need much. But Lisa always needed more. More excitement, more attention, more of whatever it was she had been chasing all these months. Well, tonight she was getting exactly what she wanted. And when she came home, she was going to find out what that really meant. I reached for the first hanger, pulled it down, and tossed the dress onto the bed. Then another and another. Slowly, methodically, I went through her things piece by piece, not in anger, not in rage, just with purpose. Lisa wanted space. She was about to get more than she ever asked for. I moved through the house with a calmness that almost unsettled me. There was no rush, no hesitation. Every action was deliberate, every decision final. I pulled open drawers, lifted dresses off hangers, folded the little things she had left scattered around. Her makeup brushes on the dresser, her perfume bottles lined up on the bathroom sink, the stack of magazines she barely read but insisted on keeping. For the first time in a long time, I looked at everything that belonged to Lisa and realized how little of it belonged to us. Somewhere along the way, our life together had become just that. Mine and hers, two separate worlds that only occasionally crossed paths. And tonight, that realization no longer hurt. It no longer had the power to break me. I grabbed a suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. It was the same one we had used on our honeymoon. The same one she had packed with excitement in her eyes as she talked about all the places we'd explore together. I wondered if she even remembered that now. Probably not. The irony wasn't lost on me as I unzipped it and started neatly placing her clothes inside. I wasn't doing this in anger, no. I was giving her what she so clearly wanted. Space, freedom, a fresh start away from the husband she had long since stopped loving. I moved through the bedroom, collecting her things with quiet efficiency. I didn't know how long she planned to be at that party, how late into the night she would let herself forget about the life she was leaving behind. But I wanted everything to be ready for her when she walked through that door. I wanted her to see, know, feel what she had done. Her favorite shoes into the suitcase. The necklace I had given her for our anniversary. The one she had once called her lucky charm but hadn't worn in over a year, into the suitcase. The silk robe she always wrapped herself in after a shower. The one I used to love seeing her in, gone. Each item I packed felt like another piece of my past slipping away. Another reminder that the woman I had once built a life with was no longer the person sleeping in my bed. By the time I was finished, the room looked emptier. Not just physically, but emotionally, like the air itself had changed. I stepped back, taking it all in. This wasn't her home anymore, and deep down I knew it hadn't been for a long time. I turned off the bedroom light and walked out, leaving the suitcase by the front door. It sat there like a statement, a silent truth waiting to be acknowledged. Now all that was left to do was wait. And when Lisa finally came home, the game she had been playing would be over. The house felt foreign now. It wasn't just the emptiness left behind after packing Lisa's things. It was something deeper, something irreversible. A shift I had never anticipated, yet now couldn't ignore. I walked into the living room and sank into the couch, staring at the darkened TV screen. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed, shoulders heavy. But I didn't feel broken, not anymore. I felt resolved. It was like my mind had finally caught up to what my heart had been trying to deny for months. Lisa wasn't coming back, not in the way I had hoped. Glancing at the clock, I noted the time, 2:13 a.m. She was still at that party, still with him. I had told myself I wouldn't check, but my hand betrayed me, reaching for my phone before I could stop it. I unlocked it, opened the message thread with Lisa. Empty. No missed calls, no texts. I hadn't expected any, but somehow the confirmation stung. My finger hovered over our last conversation from earlier that evening. Her last words, "I just need some space. Stop making a big deal out of it." I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. Wasn't that always the way? When she needed time, space, freedom, it was my job to step aside. But when I needed reassurance, commitment, honesty, I was being unreasonable, too sensitive. It wasn't just the party. It was the accumulation of 1,000 tiny betrayals, each one stacking on top of the last until it became impossible to ignore. The way she had stopped reaching for my hand in public, the way she had started wearing perfume to girls' nights when she never used to bother before, the way she had become more defensive, more distant, more absent. And now she wasn't even trying to hide it. I set my phone down, rubbing a hand over my jaw. The weight of the night settled on my chest. But there was no more indecision, no more waiting. When she came home, she would find her suitcase packed. She would see, in undeniable clarity, that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, a distant reminder that the world was still moving forward, even as my own life was coming apart. I stood up, stretching the stiffness from my muscles, and walked toward the kitchen. I needed something to ground me, to pull me out of my thoughts. I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and took a slow sip. The coldness settled in my chest, bringing me back to the present. 3:07 a.m. Still no sign of Lisa. Part of me wondered if she would even come home at all, if she'd decide to stay with Eric, wake up in his bed instead of ours. Would she even care that I knew? I shook my head. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I did next. Leaning against the counter, I glanced toward the front door, where her suitcase sat like a final chapter waiting to be closed. The next time Lisa walked through that door, she wouldn't be coming home. She would be walking into the consequences of her choices. The first thing I heard was the sound of a car door slamming. It was sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. My eyes flicked to the clock. 3:42 a.m. I had been sitting there for hours, letting my thoughts wander, letting them settle. Now the moment had arrived. Footsteps clicked against the pavement outside, slow, hesitant. She wasn't stumbling drunk, at least. That would have almost been easier if she had come home tipsy, careless, laughing about some joke only she and Eric understood. But no, this was different. She hesitated before unlocking the door, which told me one thing. She knew. The door creaked open, and Lisa stepped inside. I didn't say a word, I just watched. She was still wearing the dress she had left in, but it looked different now. Wrinkled, slightly askew, like she had worn it too long or moved in it too much. Her makeup wasn't as perfect as it had been when she walked out. The confidence she had left with, gone. She froze when she saw the suitcase by the door. Her eyes flickered between it and me, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. "Walter?" Her voice was quiet, uncertain. I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of the silence, the tension in the air. I wanted her to realize that something had changed. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "You had a good night?" Her lips parted, like she wanted to answer, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way I was looking at her. Maybe it was the way her things were neatly packed, waiting. Maybe, for the first time, she realized she had pushed too far. She swallowed hard. "It was just a party." I nodded slowly. "Just a party." A beat of silence passed between us. Then I gestured to the suitcase. "That's yours." Her breath hitched. What is this?" I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "It's what you wanted, isn't it? Space." She took a step forward, her expression shifting from shock to something more desperate. "Wait, hold on. You're kicking me out." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "No, Lisa. You did that when you walked out of here and went back to him." The color drained from her face. You didn't even try to hide it." I cut in. My voice wasn't raised, wasn't angry, but it was firm. "You didn't lie. You didn't make up an excuse. You just left." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. And that told me everything I needed to know. Lisa shook her head rapidly, as if she could rewind the night, undo what had already been done. Walter, it wasn't like that. I arched a brow. Then what was it like? She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time, she had nothing to say, no justification, no explanation. I stood up, walking toward her, stopping just a few feet away. I loved you, Lisa. I gave you everything, and you spent the night at your ex's house. My voice remained steady, but I could see the impact of my words in the way she flinched. So no, I'm not kicking you out. I'm just finally accepting the choice you already made. Her eyes glistened with something that might have been regret, maybe guilt, but it was too late for that now. She looked at the suitcase again, her breath shaky. I don't have anywhere to go. I shrugged. Not my problem. A silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then, finally, she nodded, not because she agreed, but because she realized I wasn't going to change my mind. Without another word, she reached for the suitcase. And just like that, the life we had built together was over. I watched her grip the suitcase handle, her fingers tightening around it like she was trying to convince herself this wasn't real. Maybe in her mind, this was just another fight, just another moment where she could push the limits, knowing I'd always be there to pick up the pieces. But not this time. She didn't move right away. Instead, she stood there, staring at me, like she was expecting me to take it back, like I'd break under the weight of the silence and tell her she could stay, that we could talk it through, that we could fix it. But there was nothing left to fix. The moment she left for that party, she had made her choice, and now she was living with it. She exhaled shakily and took a step toward the door, then another. But before she could reach it, she stopped. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms over my chest. "That's not my concern, Lisa." Her head snapped toward me, frustration flaring in her eyes. "You can't just throw me out like this." I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm letting you go. There's a difference." She blinked, as if the words took a second to register. "Walter, please. I made a mistake." Now that made me pause. A mistake? That's what she was calling it now. A mistake. I pushed off the wall and took a slow step toward her. "You spent the night at your ex's house, Lisa. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She shook her head quickly, desperation creeping into her features. "Nothing happened." I almost laughed at the audacity of it. "Nothing happened?" I repeated, tilting my head. "You expect me to believe that?" She hesitated, that tiny, almost imperceptible pause. That was all I needed. "It was just a party," she continued, scrambling to explain. I drank too much. I crashed on the couch. That's it, I swear." I let the silence stretch between us, watching her squirm. She was lying. Maybe not about everything, but definitely about something. And the worst part? She wasn't even good at it anymore. "You know," I said, shaking my head, "if you had come home and admitted the truth, if you had just owned what you did, I might have respected you for it." Her face twisted. "I am telling you the truth." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. That's when I knew. Even now, when she had already lost me, she was still trying to manipulate the situation, still trying to control the narrative. But the truth was standing between us, thick and undeniable. "You can tell yourself whatever you need to," I said finally, stepping back. "But it doesn't change anything." She let out a shaky breath. "So, that's it." I nodded. "Yeah, Lisa, that's it." She didn't say another word. She just looked at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe, in some way, she was, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the man waiting for her to choose me. I was the man who had finally chosen himself. She swallowed hard, grabbed her suitcase, and walked out the door. And I didn't stop her. The door clicked shut behind her, the final punctuation on a chapter one never thought would end this way. I stood there, unmoving, staring at the wood grain like it could give me answers. Didn't. The only thing I felt was the quiet settling around me, pressing in heavier than before. For the first time in years, I was alone in this house. It was strange. I had always thought of alone as a bad thing, as something to fear. But now, standing in the wreckage of a love I had once believed in, I realized something. Being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. Lisa had been gone for a while, long before she ever walked out that door. I exhaled, dragging a hand over my face, willing myself to feel something. Anger, sadness, relief, anything other than this eerie calm. But the truth was, I had already mourned this marriage long before tonight. This was just the official ending, the confirmation of what I had known deep down for months. Still, habits were hard to break. I caught myself glancing at my phone, half expecting a message, maybe a desperate plea, an apology, a last-minute attempt to manipulate the situation in her favor. But there was nothing, just an empty notification bar and a silent room. I wasn't sure what I had expected. Lisa had made her choice and I had made mine. I turned away from the door, my eyes scanning the living room. It was ours, had been ours, but suddenly it looked foreign. The framed pictures on the shelves, the throw blankets draped over the couch, the coffee mugs we had collected over the years, they all felt like relics of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe it was time to let them go, too. I walked toward the bookshelf, reaching for the first framed photo my fingers touched. It was from our 3rd anniversary, a trip to the mountains, back when we still laughed without effort, when she still looked at me like I was enough. I stared at it for a moment, tracing the edges, then turned it face down. One by one, I went through the room, removing the reminders of her, of us. Not out of spite, not in anger, just out of necessity. Because this wasn't our home anymore. It was mine. And it was time I started treating it that way. By the time I was done, the room felt lighter. Not completely, but enough. Enough for me to take my first real breath in what felt like years. I sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the exhaustion finally catch up with me. I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of loneliness, of second-guessing. But for the first time in a long time, I also felt something else, hope. Lisa had spent the night at her past. I was ready to start my future. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft, golden streaks across the walls. It was the first sunrise I had watched alone in years. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't wake up with a weight pressing down on my chest. The house was quiet, not an uncomfortable silence, but a peaceful one. A silence that belonged to me. Lisa was gone. That was a fact. And I had thought that fact would destroy me. But instead, it felt like I had finally been released from something that had been suffocating me for far too long. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, grabbing a mug from the cupboard. It was the one I always used, the one Lisa had once made fun of for being too plain. I smirked to myself as I poured the coffee. It was funny how the smallest things could feel like a reclaiming of something lost. As I took my first sip, my phone vibrated on the counter. For a moment I thought it might be her. But when I picked it up, I saw a name I hadn't expected. Charlie, my oldest friend. Hey man, heard about Lisa. Didn't want to pry, but if you need to get out for a bit, let's grab a drink tonight. My treat. I stared at the message, a slow smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. Maybe that was exactly what I needed, a reminder that life existed outside of Lisa, outside of this house, outside of the version of myself that had spent the last year clinging to something broken. I tapped out a response. Sounds good. See you at 7. As I set my phone down, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different. Not in the physical sense, but there was something about the way I was standing. Lighter, freer. Lisa had spent the night chasing the past. But me, I was finally ready to move forward. And for the first time in years, I actually believed the best was yet to come.